Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Ashley Robin. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. I am a full-time freelance artist by day, but at night I like to explore my passion for true crime and storytelling with this little series I started. So feel free to buckle up, Buttercup, and join along. Right now I feel like I don't really have anybody listening or reading my stuff, but I'm going to stay consistent with my content, so I am hopeful that eventually it will pay off, but in the meantime, I am enjoying creating this content for you. So, without any further ado, this is True Crime Time Hop, episode 25. Today brings us back to June 3rd in the year of 1968, and I know initially this was supposed to be a daily video thing where the videos corresponded with the day that we were actually on, but things happen, life happens, so I don't know if I'll be able to keep up with that pace and have it be exactly on the day we're on all the time, and trying to stick to that is a little too much pressure for me to keep up with, which is part of the reason why it tanked before. So I am out of breath. We have
True Crime
the apocalypse
Time Hop,
happening outside.
episode
I will
24.
include some videos so you can see what it looks like in Pennsylvania from all those wildfires in Canada. It is tough for us asthmatics out here. But yeah, so I can't guarantee that we will always be doing a story that corresponds with exactly the date we're on, but I'm going to stay right in the vicinity of the date we're on, and I'm going to keep it in chronological order. I will miss some from time to time because, again, life happens. However, if you check out my website, I do have a daily blog that I try to keep up with, and there are probably going to be more stories in written format on there than what you find on this channel for now. At least until there's enough support to make this a full-time gig. And if that doesn't happen, that's okay, because I'm self-employed regardless, so one way or another, I am gonna make it happen. Anyway, today brings us back to 1968 in New York, New York. Andy Warhol is one of the most influential artists of the time, known for his pop art pieces, such as the Campbell's soup can that everybody has seen, and his portraiture, such as the lovely Marilyn Monroe. He also became well known in the area for having bought an old factory that was like, I believe, 6 floors or something, and he converted the entire thing into a creative, queer-friendly mecca of sorts. This remodeled factory would go on to be named The Factory, and it would act as Andy Warhol's office, studio, and also his production studio for the small independent films that he began to create. In his films, Andy really liked to incorporate his queer and trans friends as well as drag queens, and he just really loved to think outside of the box, which is, his style in general, so that shouldn't surprise anyone. But the way that his films were definitely caught the eyes of a very androgynous woman who wanted to find a way to basically hijack his platform and take advantage of his popularity. This is where Valerie Solanas enters the chat. Now, Valerie never really held a job, and she was she really liked to think outside the box, let's put it that way. She wanted to use Mr. Warhol's credibility and try to push her agenda for a society where men were basically made obsolete, and she wanted to form the society and name it SCUM. SCUM is, of course, an acronym for Society for Cutting Up Men. So she wrote a manifesto, and she presented Warhol with the manuscript, desperate to try to get him to support her and to back her and basically to push it through so that the people could receive it and make it a thing. So we have someone that is convinced that there is a superior gender and all other genders are less than, trying to get Andy Warhol to push her agenda when he is all for gender equality and pushing boundaries and inclusion. Yeah. I guess she figured he would accept her because she was pushing boundaries, but some boundaries are in place for a reason. Once Solanas had it in her head that this was the right game plan for getting exposure for her mission, she began to attempt to walk in and just get an appointment with Mr. Warhol, as though he would be available anytime somebody off the street wants to just blow in and propose some random thing. And she was quite insulted when he was not available to talk to her. She continued to pursue it, eventually giving one of only 2 copies of her manuscript to his assistant and acting kind of aggressively about, making sure she doesn't lose it because it's one of only 2. It's very important, but also trying to get the assistant to force Warhol to look at the manuscript. Eventually, she ran into Warhol at one point and asked him if he looked into her manuscript, and he kind of brushed it off. He didn't really acknowledge it much, but he did comment on her look, and of course he likes that kind of androgynous aesthetic. So he offered her a small part in one of his independent films, which paid her $25, and then he expected to just shush her on her way, and she did not go. Solanas considered to pursue him, both calling his assistant and waiting outside of his office, hoping to run into him. But day after day, he just kind of overlooked her. He was not interested in endorsing her ideals, and he didn't really consider it beyond that point. She even offered Warhol a chair as the president of the male auxiliary branch of the society, despite the fact that she was the society's only member. But unfortunately for her, he still did not take the bait. His dismissal and his indifference only infuriated her more, not just towards him, but towards all men. Because here's another guy that just doesn't believe in this feminist ideal, and therefore he is just reaffirming why men are inherently evil. I'm just trying to understand myself, to be honest. Once she accepted that there was no convincing Andy Warhol to get on board, her attitude shifted from glorifying him as though he was going to be her savior to condemning him and all other men just because he was not willing to cooperate with her scheme, thinking that he was going to eventually regret his not getting on board because she was so delusional that she was convinced that this idea was going to take off and that this idea would basically save the world from itself. And with that, she wanted her script back. In her eyes, that was her masterwork. That was all of her innovative thinking, and she didn't want him to have it in his possession because she didn't feel he was worthy of it. She felt that he may even take it and rebrand it as his own and put it out to the world anyway without giving her any credit. And the more that she ruminated over those delusions, the more that she could not possibly risk that being the case. Unfortunately, though, they could not find it, so she did not get it back, and in her eyes, that was the last straw. She thought this was them intentionally keeping it so that they could use it for their own benefit. And this brings us to that fateful day on the 6th floor of Warhol's new office building in Union Square, where he was having a meeting with Mario Amaya, who was a London art gallery owner. Valerie Solanas showed up with a .32 Beretta as well as a .22 caliber revolver. With the .32 in her hand, she walked up to Warhol, largely going unnoticed. That was until she shot Warhol as well as Amaya. 2 bullets pierced Warhol's esophagus, liver, spleen, stomach, and both lungs. He was briefly pronounced dead, and when he eventually was revived, he was stuck having to wear a medical corset for the rest of his life to keep his organs in their designated locations. Amaya was thankfully not badly injured. A few hours after the shooting, Solanas walked up to a police officer in Times Square. She brazenly handed him her 2 guns and told him that she was wanted and that she shot Andy Warhol, very matter-of-factly. She told him that she felt that Warhol had too much control over her life. After several psychological evaluations, she was determined to have paranoid schizophrenia. In spite of this, she was still found to be competent to stand trial. She pled guilty to an assault charge and was ordered to serve 3 years. And she was given credit towards her time served for the time that she spent in holding while she was getting evaluated. So, in less than 3 years, she was released, and that was 1971 by that point. Even after all of this, she continued to try to gain traction with her ideas to create a group of women that would make it their goal to eradicate men from the gene pool. Her mental health continued to decline, however. In 1988, she died alone in a homeless hotel in San Francisco. As far as the impact that this whole ordeal had on Andy Warhol, his wounds went much deeper than the bullets. His art, as well as his filming, began to diminish. He dabbled a little bit, including a series of paintings he created centered around death, and another one centered around guns, but otherwise his pursuits were mostly business-related. I said that I wasn't creative since I was shot, because after that I stopped seeing creepy people, Warhol wrote in his journal in November of 1978. The whole thing also intensified his crippling fear of hospitals. He began to practice homeopathic remedies more, and he enjoyed incorporating crystals into his daily routine. But sadly, his avoidance of medical professionals resulted in his untimely death. He delayed a gallbladder surgery that he desperately needed for several years. When he finally got the surgery, he had a complication which ultimately resulted in cardiac arrest. He was unable to be revived, and on February 21st of 1987, at the age of 58, Andy Warhol lost his life. He left a legacy of beautiful art and an empire of business endeavors in his wake. May his name never be forgotten. As far as the fate of Valerie Solanas' manifesto, which, by the way, is titled Up Your Ass, if you were wondering, she actually was more successful than she ever was in her life when her book was mass-produced and distributed to a select niche group of feminists, which really resonate with the text, so there's that. More than she deserved, but cool, I guess. She sort of had a tragic life and death as well. Mental illness really is just a terrible way to go, even if she did bad things. She, in my personal opinion, should not have been found competent to stand trial, and I think she would have done better with some psychological intervention as her punishment, but what do I know? If you're interested in knowing more about her story, there was a movie made about her called I Shot Andy Warhol, and that is from 1996. I watched it in my research, and I do suggest you check it out too if you're into art or psychology. It's definitely an interesting watch. And all that being said, I hope you have a safe rest of your night and take care.